Someone asked me the other day whether rejoining the EU single market is a good idea for the UK. Overall, I would say that it's definitely not a good idea, even though I voted to remain and probably would do so again if we had another referendum. Economically, rejoining the single market and the customs union would give a massive boost to the UK economy, but by removing all trade frictions, already most economists would agree that Brexit is having a negative impact on the UK economy. Clearly, UK trade hasn't dropped off a cliff. Big companies have continued to export and import products from the EU, but there have been some dramatic effects. There's a lot more paperwork and costs, and this has particularly hit SMEs, some of which actually haven't been able to continue trading with the EU. For larger companies, the increased costs have affected competitiveness and inflation. And we can also point out that the impact on companies importing from the EU is going to be felt a lot more from this year onwards. Until now, the UK has accepted products conforming to EU rules, but this year, EU products will have to meet UK law. This is particularly affecting animal and plant products imported from the EU. These products have to be certified in conformity with UK law, and this is currently causing a big headache for EU exporters. And for the UK, this is likely to lead to increased costs and even product shortages. So from an economic perspective, rejoining would give a massive boost. Products certified in either the EU or UK could freely be sold, and this would remove the frictions on UK-EU trade. It would also solve the problem of the customs border that we effectively have between GB mainland and Northern Ireland, so this would be another positive. There is one slight negative point from an economic perspective, that if the UK was part of the EU customs union again, it would mean that the UK couldn't sign its own free trade agreements. However, the gains from removing all the frictions from the UK's biggest trading partner would definitely outweigh this. So from an economic perspective, it would clearly be to the UK's advantage to rejoin the single market. But from a democratic point of view, it's a terrible idea. The UK would have to accept all future EU laws, yet would have no say on them. It's perhaps not so bad in terms of existing EU laws. Most of those are already built into UK legislation, and we know what we're getting into. But if the EU adopted some dramatically different policies, the UK would just have to follow. I personally don't think this is a good idea. I do think sovereignty matters. And I'm certain that a majority of the UK population wouldn't accept the UK being subject to EU law and EU court rulings without having any influence whatsoever over them. The Brexiteers would ensure that this was well understood. So the choice is to stay out of the EU or rejoin it. And I don't think rejoin is an option for the foreseeable future. So I think the UK has no choice but to just make the best of Brexit as it is. Joining the single market is not a good option for the UK. Now, the Labour Party, who are likely to form the next government, have ruled out joining the single market or customs union. So whoever is governing after the next election, no one is calling for the UK to rejoin the single market from a political perspective. However, Keir Starmer has made some remarks about the UK not diverging from EU laws. He's also talked about getting a better agreement with the EU and mentioned areas such as a veterinary agreement to ease food trade and a mutual recognition of qualifications. The problem with this is that in order to get agreements like this, the UK is going to have to follow EU law in those areas and possibly also make financial contributions to the EU in order to benefit from them. There may be opportunities to not let UK laws diverge too much from those of the EU. This would help companies doing business in both the EU and UK. On the other hand, if there's too much alignment with EU legislation, The Brexiteers, quite rightly, would kick up a fuss, and I think public opinion would turn against this. I think people do care about sovereignty. That said, there is a bit of popular support for the UK rejoining the single market. A YouGov survey showed that 7 in 10 Britons support a closer relationship with the EU, while 57% support joining the single market. So I think these issues will continue to be controversial. Overall, I think the Labour approach is probably the right one, not rejoining the single market and customs union, but looking for opportunities to improve aspects of the agreement, to reduce frictions and for strategic alignment with EU law where it's in the UK interest. I hope you found this information useful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.